Hey guys, Full Glass Dani here, and welcome to your Bordeaux Quick Class. I'm super excited to be rolling out this series of videos for you, highlighting wine regions from around the world in a very quick bullet point kind of manner. This is really just scratching the surface of these regions, but it's going to help you understand the wines so much more, really just what you need to know to enjoy the wines, feel a bit more confident when you're picking up a bottle at the store, and understanding what's in your glass when you are drinking it with dinner. So, of course, we had to start with Bordeaux, the most famous wine region in the world historically. And I'll be honest, guys, I have taught 2-hour-long classes on Bordeaux, so I really am just scratching the surface here. Bordeaux's kind of a monster when it comes to studying wine and really learning about it, but this is going to just really give you those highlights that I was talking about. So let's get into it. Now, one of the things that I love to ask people when we start talking about Bordeaux is, this is a wine region that we all are familiar with, right? Even people that are not into wine will associate the region of Bordeaux with wine. But how much wine are you actually drinking from Bordeaux on a weekly, monthly basis? At least for those of us here on the West Coast in the United States, we don't see a lot of Bordeaux on store shelves. So it's interesting that it's such a famous region, but it's not necessarily something that we are drinking wine from all the time. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit here. So why is it so famous? So there's a long history for Bordeaux, but in general, Bordeaux is so famous thanks to the English. They actually ruled the area of Bordeaux for 300 years between 1152 and 1453. So we're going back quite a ways here. But England at the time, it was too cold to grow grapes. They couldn't make wine in their own country. So when they acquired Bordeaux, they really blasted their wines everywhere. And Bordeaux just throughout time just became really well known for, quality wines, and it gained wealth. And of course, whenever the region starts gaining wealth with all that, it's at the forefront of technology, of science, of winemaking improvements. So Bordeaux was really ahead of the time compared to many other wine regions around the world, and just throughout history became known as the premier winemaking region of the world, even after the English stopped ruling it. So this has really been carried throughout history, and this is why even today we associate so many there are so many expensive wines that come from Bordeaux. It's because of this notoriety throughout history. I always love to point out too that it's one of the first regions where wine was sold by brand name rather than generic region. So if we can imagine prior to the 20th century, when any of us were alive, wines were not sold in bottle, they were sold in barrels. And it used to just, the barrels would just say what region a wine was from. And Bordeaux, because of this notoriety and these estates were gaining recognition and everything, they started putting their names on the barrels so that when you are in a bar and you see a couple different barrels to choose from, you can be like, oh, I actually want that Haut-Brion in there, not just the one that just says Bordeaux. So it was one of the first regions to do that, which is really huge. It was also one of the first regions to ship their wines in bottles, which was definitely at the forefront at the time of technology. So, that's just scratching the surface of Bordeaux history, but it's really interesting to think about why even today we think about Bordeaux as such a high quality region. It's because of that history. So here's where Bordeaux is. I know my face is in the way here, so let's just move me for a second. There's Bordeaux. It's in southwest France, and it's right next to the Atlantic Ocean. This is the Atlantic Ocean here, and Bordeaux actually means next to the water. So throughout history, that was a very easy access point to be shipping their wines out to the world, which of course was a pro for them for sure. So today it actually produces a quarter of the wines made in France. So that's a lot. And when I asked you the question of how much Bordeaux are you drinking on a daily basis, you might not be drinking that much Bordeaux because 58% of wines from this region are actually consumed in France. So they are a huge supplier for the French market, and they're exporting the rest, 42%, to the rest of the world. So it's not even just to the United States, that's to the entire world. And, those wines that are being exported are the ones that are the top quality, the very, very expensive ones. I mean, we absolutely are getting everyday drinkers too, but we're seeing a different Bordeaux than maybe what you would get in France. So it's interesting. I also love this. One of my sources said that there was over 850 million bottles a year produced. That's insane. And over 8,000 producers. So when I say that Bordeaux is a monster, it definitely is. So here's what we need to know when it comes to Bordeaux. When you think of Bordeaux wines, I want you to think of blends. And the reason why the Bordelais blend their wine, we're talking about different grapes, right? So they're blending Cabernet Sauvignon with Merlot and things like that. It is the land of the blends because since they are right on the water, right on the Atlantic Ocean, they actually deal with kind of a difficult climate and what we say wonky weather. If you've ever heard of a good or a bad vintage, This really comes from Bordeaux because they have so many different weather patterns throughout the year. So they will actually grow and blend different grapes together to give them insurance, because one grape variety will do better with spring frosts, whereas another one will do better with, fall rains and things like that. So basically, because because the weather is not ideal to be growing grapes in Bordeaux, it just gives those winemakers insurance. And this is throughout history that we've done that. Also, when you think of Bordeaux, I want you to think about oak. So Bordeaux, of course, is at the forefront of aging wines in new French oak barrels, which gives the wine this beautiful complexity. It really was they were at the forefront of what so many wineries do today. So Bordeaux is kind of where it all started. So just kind of keep that in mind, that lots of oak is used in Bordeaux. So when we are thinking of the grapes of Bordeaux, here are the ones that you need to know. Now, there are many, many more that are allowed to be in Bordeaux blends, but if we were studying or if you just need to take something quick away, this is what you need to remember. So the white wines of Bordeaux are going to be Sauvignon Blanc blended with Semillon. Okay, so Sauvignon Blanc based blends with Semillon, depending on where you're from for sure. But that's what we got. Sauvignon Blanc is actually originally from Bordeaux. It's its hometown. So I know that you probably are drinking Sauvignon Blanc from all over the rest of the world. Definitely pick up a bottle of Bordeaux. You'll see what their expression of Sauvignon Blanc is. And on the reds, we've got Merlot is actually the #1 planted grape of Bordeaux. Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. Again, there are other grapes that you can find in these blends, but these are the 3 top ones to remember. And again, Bordeaux is actually the hometown for these grape varieties too. So it's interesting, right? These are all very, very famous grapes that we know and love. We see on store shelves from all over the world, but their hometown is Bordeaux because Bordeaux is so famous. These are the wines that people know. So when we're talking about the white wines of Bordeaux, we're talking about Sauvignon Blanc blended with Semillon. And here's what you can expect to get from these wines. So because Bordeaux is more of a maritime climate, it's not super, super cold. The white wines are a little bit riper and rounder than what we might see from a region like New Zealand or the coldest parts of, Loire Valley and things like that. So Bordeaux is a little bit different. And actually, we've seen a huge change in the profile of these wines in the last decade or so. When I was first learning about wine, it was kind of like, we don't really drink white Bordeaux. It was kind of the thing. But they've completely changed the profile of these wines in the last decade to appeal to what consumers want, which are bright, brisk, right? Like very vibrant Sauvignon Blanc expressions. So Bordeaux, you can expect a lemon variety, think like an unripe lemon peel kind of thing, unripe grapefruit, a green apple. So think about the difference between like a really ripe red apple versus an unripe green apple. So it's kind of that sour feeling. And that's because we want to retain the acidity of these Sauvignon Blancs. You can also find things like unripe pineapple, apricot, all this fun stuff. Also, bell pepper is a really notable characteristic of grapes from Bordeaux. If it originated from Bordeaux, so our Merlot, our Cabernet Sauvignon, our Cabernet Franc, our Sauvignon Blanc, all these wines have this bell pepper jalapeno note. So you can really find that in our Sauvignon Blanc expressions. And then on top of that, because we are dealing with the old world, we'd say European wine styles, we can also get at this beautiful minerality in our white Bordeaux blends like whetstone and mushroom. So in a nutshell, I would say if you're picking up a white Bordeaux, it's going to be a dry, round, beautiful white wine with pronounced acidity. It's going to be great. That's my in a nutshell with that. Now moving on to reds, because this is definitely more of a red wine territory. Depending on where you're from or where you're getting your bottle from, it might be a Merlot-based wine or a Cabernet Sauvignon-based wine. But in general, most of these Bordeaux are getting this mix of beautiful black, dark fruit mixed with this earthy terroir that I like to call the Bordeaux funk. So things like black cherry, blackberry, plum, red cherry, all of these. And then depending on the type of grape that, the main grape that's blended in here, we might get a dark chocolate or a coffee note. And if the wine is aged in oak, that's where you're going to get those beautiful vanilla and baking spices. Again, bell pepper is going to be at the forefront here. Leather, mushroom, graphite, and think about all these things. I know this can be kind of funky, and if you're used to drinking a lot of California wines or New World wines that are all very fruit forward, this might seem a little weird to you, but trust me, this is what makes Bordeaux so fun and special and just fun to explore, So we might get that barnyard, that kind of funky, animally kind of smell, or a forest floor. That's our nice way of saying, something that's like decomposing or even a dried leaves kind of note. Sometimes we can get tobacco type things. There's a lot of fun stuff that you can find in Bordeaux. So next time you pick up a bottle, see if you can pick up any of these. So in general, I would say that red Bordeaux wines are going to be dry. Of course, they're never sweet. Dry just means there's no sugar, guys. It does not mean that a lot of people confuse fruitiness with dryness. That is incorrect. Dry just means there's no sugar in the wine. So all these wines, of course, are going to be dry, medium to full bodied with medium to high tannin, based on where you're getting it from within Bordeaux or the price point and things like that. So it's usually a mix of dark fruit flavors mingled with that Bordeaux funk. That's my in a nutshell for our red Bordeauxs. Now, if we want to get a little geekier or a little bit more in depth of, where we're actually picking up our wines from Bordeaux, I wanted to highlight a couple of regions that you might see on labels. So for our most basic Bordeaux, and I shouldn't say basic, but for our most standard Bordeaux, the ones that you're going to find under 20 bucks or so, we'll just simply say Bordeaux or Bordeaux Superior on the label. These are just meant for everyday consumption. They're a great intro to Bordeaux wines. They're not going to be too funky or too, in your face or anything. They're meant for drinking on a daily basis. So basically, I would put them in the same camp. If a wine is called Bordeaux Superior, it basically just hits a couple more requirements that a regular Bordeaux wouldn't. But honestly, I wouldn't necessarily pick a Bordeaux Superior or over a Bordeaux necessarily. I really put them in the same camp. Bordeaux Superior is just aged at least 9 months before release and at least 11% alcohol by volume, which is really not hard to achieve by today. But if you want to go a little bit more in depth, this is where studying or just kind of remembering these terms will really help you out. So we split up Bordeaux between the left bank and the right bank. Okay, so when you're going down the river, the estuary here, actually when you're going up the river, that's for the left or the right bank. So on the left bank, they're known for wines that are based on Cabernet Sauvignon blended with Merlot. And this is not black and white, remember, but in general, they're Cabernet Sauvignon based blends based on the soils and all that kind of fun stuff. So you might pick up a bottle of wine from the Medoc. That's this whole area over here. Or within the Medoc, you have Haut-Medoc. And then within Haut-Medoc, you have a couple of really famous communes, including Saint-Estèphe, Pauillac, Saint-Julien, and Margaux. Now, there are others. I'm just highlighting the ones that are the most famous. And of course, the smaller of a region you go to or you get a wine from, the more expensive it's probably going to be. So a bottle of wine that just says Medoc on it is going to be a lot less expensive than a wine that says Pauillac on it. This is where we get to the really expensive stuff. Further south, we have Graves. I'll move myself here for just a second. There we go. So here's Graves. And Graves is named after gravel soils, not grapes. That's weird, but it's gravel soils, very iconic for Cabernet Sauvignon. So within Graves, you'll find wines from Pessac-Lognan. That's the most famous subregion of Graves there. Okay, so any wines that you're picking up from these regions are in general going to be more Cabernet Sauvignon based. And, the thing to know with that, I know that a lot of people think that they don't like Merlot or they prefer a Cab, but just remember that Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot are best friends. They are great blending partners. This is why this has historically been the case for Bordeaux wines. And if you're someone that really likes Cabernet Sauvignon, but you think that you don't like Merlot, maybe just give Merlot another shot because all these wines are blended with that. And it's really fun to see how Bordeaux shows the difference of that, maybe compared to a state like California, how their Merlots would be, right? It's a fun little difference. Okay, and then if you're getting a wine from the right bank of Bordeaux, these are going to be known for Merlot-based blends blended with Cabernet Franc. So I like to say that the right bank wines they tend to be a little bit more rustic. They tend to be a little bit more funky. So this is where if you like to explore or you want to really see how different Bordeaux can be, get a wine from the right bank of Bordeaux. So the most famous areas in this region are going to be Saint-Emilion and its satellite regions. So you might see Saint-Georges, Saint-Emilion, Lussac, Montagne, Puigseguin. You might see all these regions they're called satellites of Saint-Emilion. And then you have Pomerol, which is an incredibly famous town, home to the most expensive wine actually in Bordeaux. So if you ever get in a bottle of Pomerol, it is quite a treat. And next to Pomerol, you might find Lalande de Pomerol, which tends to be a little bit better in price. But again, if you're picking up any wines from these regions, they're going to be Merlot based. So these are the things that we really study as somms to understand what we're picking up in the store. Now, I had to highlight the dessert wine of Bordeaux, which is Sauternes. This is actually my first favorite wine in the entire world. And that's because it's a sweet, delicious, amazing wine. So Sauternes is a region in Bordeaux that basically it's got these perfect climatic conditions that appeal to something called noble rot, aka botrytis. And what this does basically is it sucks all of the water out of individual grapes and leaves behind just sugar. So when you're making wine out of this, it basically creates this beautifully honeyed, sweet dessert style wine. You might get things like apricot, mango, marmalade, honeysuckle, and then with age, you might get a little butterscotch or ginger. These are really beautiful wines. And they will last for a very long time. They are very expensive to make, so they command a little bit of a higher price. You'll usually find them in the 375 milliliter bottles. But the good thing is once you open it, you can actually keep it open for quite a long time. You don't need to drink it like that night. So these wines will age for decades. They're absolutely beautiful, and I definitely recommend if you've never tried one before. If you go to a nice restaurant, a lot of times they'll have Sauternes on by the glass as a dessert wine option. So I hope that you've enjoyed this Bordeaux quick class, giving you a lot of little nuggets to remember. So the next time that you go and pick up a bottle of Bordeaux from your local wine shop, you'll understand a little bit more about what's going on in the bottle. So for more education and resources, you can visit us at fullglassevents.com, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.